if you're on your path towards understanding yourself, which precedes action,
yes,
and you reach a point where you feel like you're ready to take action, you go volunteer somewhere, you go volunteer at a homeless shelter, for example, and you go there and you're faced with the madness. You know, the reality that sometimes it doesn't matter what you do. I mean, you're doing good, but the attachment to the result brings
this is the biggest problem for us. This is the biggest problem. It's very hard to see this. Because even if this was just with your alcoholic brother, you do have compassion, there's no question. You see his suffering. And because we don't see this, but because of my own huge neediness, my attachment, my neurotic attachment that can't bear him being an alcoholic. So that it pollutes my compassion. So I get in there and give advice. But I'm kind of I'm sort of like I'm manipulating him to do what I want. And then when he doesn't, I get all upset. Because he didn't do what I wanted. But that's got strings attached, isn't it? So we've got to be able to help. With I don't mean no expectations in a dumb way. You've got to do what you can. If you can go in and bring $5 million and throw, and give and develop a new homeless centre with nice architected, lovely rooms, then go for it. If you can't, you help one homeless person. You only can do what you can with confidence and optimism, but not expecting things to be lovely. And that's why we get disappointed, because it doesn't turn out nice. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, that's exactly.
So that's what causes suffering. It's not the ugly homeless place that causes suffering. It's not my ugly old alcoholic brother that causes me suffering. It's my own neuroses, and that's what's hard to see. So don't expect too much of yourself. One step at a time. If you go start working, if you carry a load that you can't carry yet because you haven't done enough weightlifting, don't break your back. You do what you can. But don't be nervous, and don't expect to be perfect, and don't expect yourself to be perfect. It's okay to be normal and be neurotic. It's okay, as long as you're seeing it. And realising why, what, this, that, so long as you're knowing what's going on in your mind and understanding what's there. Because even ourselves, if we don't forget even about trying to help others, even when you start to work on your own mind, naturally what you're doing when you're working on your own mind, using the Buddhist view, you're starting to see what's there. I mean, they even say in the single point of concentration technique that these 9 stages of development, this technique that the Hindus invented, that is a crucial technique in Buddhism, that one of the signs of success from the first of the 9 stages is you think you're getting worse. Well, of course you do, because you're seeing a ridiculous old insane asylum in here. You never paid attention before. Like if you go to the gym for the first time, you come home with muscles you didn't know you had. But we know it's a good sign, but we can't cope with our own neuroses. That's our problem. That's why some of us repress them all and go nuts 60 years later, or some people blame everybody else. But to own them is really the hardest job, so we be very humble with ourselves. And one of the biggest practices is to recognize, is sort of like I like to talk about my crazy roommates. And as you see your mind more, you're going to uncover whole attics and attics full of more crazy roommates coming out the door every day. Another level of different kinds of attachment and more anger and more jealousy and more this. It's going to be there for quite a while, Buddha says, before you really get rid of it all. Way to go, honey. So we've got to have this courageous attitude of welcoming your own crazy mind every time you see your next bit of anger, every time you see your next bit of jealousy, not beating yourself up for it, which is what we love to do. Expecting me to be better than I should be. That's one of the worst faults we all have. We practice away. We're being nice people. We're trying not to harm, lie, steal. You're an amazing human being so good, but all we do is criticise ourselves. Oh, I should be better than I am, or I'm so depressed, I'm so negative, I'm so jealous. I mean, we're ridiculous. We've got to learn to live with all this stuff, like these roommates, but not let them run the house. Don't expect them to go overnight. They won't. If you've got a Buddhist path, you'll know before you won't get rid of this stuff until you've got high realisations of emptiness. Way to go, honey. Even a friend of mine who's a professional meditator, retreater, 3-year retreats, 4-year retreats, intensive, serious practitioner. After years and years, he said he went to Lama Zopa, our teacher, really distressed about whole new levels in his own self of anger and rage and arrogance. He was freaked out. And Lama Zopa laughed and said, fantastic, the dirt has to come out. The dirt has to come out. Another whole level. So we've got to have courage to know how deep, if you really do study Buddhist stuff, you do, I'm not sure, say study the Buddhist view of the mind, this stuff goes to phenomenally subtle levels. So we've got to be very courageous with long-term view. But also then rejoice and delight in your progress. Rejoice in your good qualities. I mean, if you want to look at, I'm not thinking we're so special, but the fact that we're even here at a talk whatever kind of talk, to think about, more than just eating, sleeping and going to the toilet is pretty admirable. And if we looked at our lives, so do you kill, lie, steal, cheat on other partners, rape people, beat people up? Well, honey, you trying to be a better person? You're taking responsibility for your mind? You should be weeping in happiness for yourself. You're part of the 0.1% called moral people. You should be blissed out, but we're not, all of us. We're always finding fault. Oh, I should be better. This is the irony of ego. It's addicted to misery. So if we can't cope with it here, you can't cope out there, honey. There's no question. People go mad. They kill themselves because they can't cope with the world. It's only because of our own attachment and neediness for it to be all cute and nice, and then to get nice, cute end results. You understand. And the biggest problem too is, let's say you got a neurotic mum, whatever, and you decide to go to help your mum, and no matter what you do, we all know this, no matter what you do, she's never satisfied. We're familiar with that relationship. You get exhausted. You feel like you've been, she's eating your blood. It's like a vampire, But because we try, then we think, I must have done the wrong thing. I better try this method. Then I tried that one. Before you know it, you're exhausted because you've tried every possible method. Because what's happening is you're expecting her to change. So because she doesn't change, you blame yourself for not being the right way. You did perfectly. She's just neurotic and can't change herself, that's all. So we shouldn't judge our being good or bad or making the right effort based on the end result. That's the wrong way to think about it. Yeah?
So if I understand you correctly, it's sort of as if meditation is the oil that keeps...
What? Sorry, what?
It seems as if meditation, like mindful meditation, self-compassion is the oil that keeps the machine of, thought and action or wisdom and compassion.
I don't know if that works for your mind. You say that. That's great. Sounds good. Whatever works. Okay, great. Yes. What else, people? Something else? Yes.
Yes. You talked about attachment as being grounded in primordial neediness.
It is almost as if you could say it is deep down, this constant neediness, this constant craving to have everything to be nice and to get what I want. Very deep, yes.
And so I was wondering how much work have you, or how much research have you done on intergenerational trauma being coded in the DNA?
Oh, I see, yeah. None at all. Because the Buddhist view doesn't talk about that way. It doesn't mean it's not valid. Buddha doesn't talk about the physical at all. He doesn't say the physical doesn't play a role. I mean, the Buddhist model of the body and the mind, which is similar to the Hindu one, which is similar to the yogic one, which is the same as the Tibetan medical one, it talks a very different way about the physical energies, very, very different model, completely different, not the Western one at all. And there's an intimate relationship between body and mind. There's no question about it. But the Buddha's key point is the mind is the main thing. So when Buddhism discusses the mind, he wouldn't talk about intergenerational stuff at all, because he would say you didn't come from your mother. This is maybe we have to talk about karma briefly here. The Buddhist view, which is the hypothesis we're using in this room, is that your consciousness, your mind, these words are used synonymously. What's your name? Deborah. When your mummy and daddy, assuming they old-fashioned mummy and daddy, had hopped into a bed or something, then they were the condition. And then your consciousness from before, this is part of Buddha's deal, your consciousness goes way back. Your consciousness ran to that egg and sperm like a magnet, So they didn't create you, not one atom. So the way Buddha talks about karma, everything that's in our mind, our thoughts, feelings, emotions, tendencies, psychosis, love, compassion, being good at music, you name it. Not one atom of this comes from your parents. It doesn't mean you can't see evidence of it in the genes, the DNA, the way we talk in the West. And there's all this discussions between these Buddhists and the scientists looking into this. But the Buddhist view is very clear that you come fully programmed from the first second of conception, right at that second, into that egg and sperm, bringing your own tendencies with you, bringing your own seeds and imprints, and even will bring your experiences. I mean, it's all gone into in great detail in the Buddhist literature. But this is a fundamental basis in the Buddhist view, that you're not the result of your grandparents and parents and even the genes and the DNA. You can see evidence of things there, but this is not where you'd look if you're a Buddhist. Wouldn't be the I mean, people who are doing, Buddhists who are doing scientific research might look at the things and bring them together, But it's not the... So did you have something behind that sentence? Something you want to say then? Like give an example of what you're going to say, then I'll give the Buddhist explanation of it.
No, I was just wondering if there was a connection to our attachments. And
So when you say intergenerational, you mean mummy, daddy, grandpa, grandma?
Yes, intergenerational.
There could easily be, in the sense that Okay, this is how the Buddha talks about karma, you know. So if you've got the karma from past tendencies, the Buddha talks, karma is just a word they use to refer to what your mind does every minute, and how everything we do in our mind leaves imprints in the mind or programs our mind. So if you've got due to, say, strong killing in the past, you'll get born into a family of fishermen. Let's say, Buddhist view would be. So you can track it back, or let's say you're born into poor people, let's say a group of people who have a tendency to be very kind, and you might end up being kind too. Well, they're kind because they were kind before, and you were kind because you were kind before, and you happen to come together. The same with people who, a fascist mummy will give birth to a fascist baby. They didn't make the fascist baby, but those tendencies are in that person's mind. So you wouldn't track them back through the parents, not in the Buddhist view. You can see evidence of it, but it's in the mind itself. I know, I was saying a few things quickly here, but anyway. Did it make any sense, anything else here? Okay. Someone else, yes?
You were saying the irony of the ego is that we don't like ourselves.
Well, it's sort of ironic, isn't it? We're our own worst enemies, always negative, always putting ourselves down, always criticising, always needy, get angry, upset easily, depressed, everything's always wrong. The tiniest thing that goes wrong, we have a panic attack. I mean, I don't know, is this familiar with you all? Anybody recognise what I'm saying? What do you think? I mean, very broad stroke what I'm saying. But the point about ego in Buddhism is it's not referring to anything good. The way Buddhism talks about it, it's neurotic, delusional, needy, grasping, manipulative, crazy. The positive stuff in us, the way they talk, love, compassion, empathy, these are not characteristics of ego in the way Buddhism uses the word, that's all. So we have to define our terms a bit here. Go on. Is that what you want to say?
No, I guess I just wanted some examples because I didn't quite understand.
Oh, okay. Okay. So taking this model of the mind, negative states, positive, there's a third category called neutral, which really doesn't mean they're not important. It's more I like to call them the mechanics of our mind, like concentration, being able to remember things. They're neither good nor bad. Thieves need to remember things, and, good people need to remember things. But there's the qualities that are particularly virtuous, that are connected to others, like empathy, compassion, harmony, kindness, generosity. Those immediately, would you agree that if they're more prevalent, would you agree if they're more prevalent, even in one relationship, things work well? It's very peaceful, you laugh a lot, you're kind to each other. It's very nice, isn't it? So look what happens when you start to fight with that person. Immediately anger rises, jealousy, you're hurt, she's hurt, the tears are coming. It's really distressing. And it's always negative. Well, that's in general with each other. But then when we look at our own mind and say we've got a strong tendency to be depressed, a strong tendency to be angry, even though anger is all about other people, can you only imagine what that's doing to that person? That person, as soon as anything goes wrong, they shout and yell. I mean, they're destroying themselves right there. It can't possibly be healthy. You're polluting yourself right there. That person's miserable. Would you agree angry people are miserable? Well, that's ego. That's what he means by ego. When it's distressed, self-centered by definition. By definition, self-centered. Neurotic, victim. It's victim. Even though an angry person is quite aggressive, it's like a little child in there. How dare you do that to me? Smash. That's what ego means in Buddha. The irony of ego is not some big, strong thing. It's small, neurotic, fear-based. They're all fear-based. They're all anxiety-based. They're all panic attacks. I mean, look at a person being angry. We just say, they're being angry. Excuse me, they're having a serious mental breakdown. And if they keep going, that's what we call paranoid and psychotic, put them in prison. But it's called the mind's out of control. So these neuroses, which we think are normal in our models of the mind, Buddha says they're really serious, unhappy, painful mental illnesses that are the source of my pain. Love doesn't cause you suffering. Happiness doesn't cause you suffering. Forgiveness doesn't cause you suffering. Patience doesn't cause you suffering. Love doesn't cause suffering. They're expansive, optimistic, positive. So if your mind is full of those, you're a healthy person. Slowly, we've got to get there. You see what I'm saying a bit? Does that make sense? But it's not moralistic. Don't hear it this way. We're so used to thinking it's like punishment and reward. Buddhism doesn't talk this way. There's no creator in Buddha's view. There's no person punishing or rewarding. We punish ourselves and we reward ourselves, Buddha says. By the way, we are in our own minds, And this is the accountability that I'm talking about. Does it make sense, people? Yeah.
You talked about delusion being the the bottom, the basis of all our stories that we believe.
Oh, okay, I said it so quickly. I'll say it again.
Yeah,
Right.
so do you have like little baby steps or little steps on
Yes,
how to
darling, of
actually
course.
get down to that
No, of course, of course, of course.
delusion to
Yeah.
start breaking it?
No, of course we have. I mean, the classic, as I said, kind of junior school, high school approach, and very much that's the Buddhist approach, certainly the Tibetan one, is structured very step by step, which it should be, you know. And it sounds kind of boring, like I said before, but the first step has to be using your will, your determination, your mind to control your behaviour. Because behaviour means your body and speech. And we all know in this world, it's the body and speech that do the harm, isn't it? The mind causes it, but you can't begin to look at your mind if you can't control the servants of the mind, which is your body and speech. So this is why in the Buddhist view, the traditional one of controlling and discipline, and sounds so boring. That's your first step. So even, I would say, it's really not a joke. It sounds almost funny. But look how we love to talk bad things about people, especially behind their backs, especially politicians. We think it's a virtue to never stop criticising people. I'm not trying to be sounding like Pollyanna here. Look at families. Look at work. You can't wait to get home to talk to hubby about that colleague. You can't wait to talk to that sister about that sister. We can't wait to vomit out our feelings. And they're valid feelings. It's okay. But we're very uncontrolled, even with our speech. We mightn't be murderers and rapists, you know. But it's our speech we do a lot of harm. Look at the fights in families. It's heartbreaking. So even just this, if we can really recognise, you know, it sounds so boring to say have good behaviour. It sounds ridiculous. But it's quite profound. To be really cautious when you're with other people, to be cautious, not manipulative, to not say things, and control your own mind, but for whose sake is yours. Control your speech, but for your sake, not because you're going to be a good girl. So already then that gives you more chance when you do sit down for 5 minutes and start to watch your breath, this traditional technique, just watch your breath to anchor your mind to the breath so you can start to hear the thoughts that inform your daily behaviour. It's an enormously long-term job in the way Buddha's talking about it. But you start small, you know. Even the thought for me is start with the thought that my mind isn't set in stone. I can learn to know my thoughts. I can learn to change. And it's one step at a time. But already the practice, I mean, I know for me because anger was one of my main things. And even after 20 years of being a Buddhist, still my anger was so volatile. And it took a long time for me to really have experiential confidence that it wasn't at the core of my being. Because the stronger our habits are, whether it's depression or whatever it is, we really believe that's who I am. We define ourselves by them. And there's a story going on in our head reaffirming this is me. We don't even notice it. So we're sticking ourselves in stone, you know. So to realise, it's not to have this openness about what's inside. First to try and control the behaviour, watch the words especially words. I think us humans are so clever with our words. And then begin to know I can start to hear my mind. You've got to start like that. Slowly, 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 I tell you. Do you understand? Make sense? Yeah.
My question pertains to something that we spoke about before. You mentioned even upon conception that we arrive.
Yes, in this world, fully programmed.
Imprints and
Yes, yes.
our tendencies.
Yes.
This is how we.
This is the Buddhist view, yeah.
And I would request for you to speak of this as we go through life and with intention to try to manage our mind, to manage the mind, and to develop.
Yes.
To learn to ask the right questions of my own mind.
That's right. Yes.
It's not out there. It's what's going on.
I understand. Yes. Yes.
And what do I take? What moves forward?
Oh, I understand. Okay.
In other words, in future lives, where do you start? Where does this process start? What carries through? What does not?
Well, first of all, where does it start is a big problem, because the Buddha would say it doesn't. It's beginningless, which is a bit hilarious to us. Okay, so never mind that one. Okay, leave that one for now. But the thing is, okay, we can see, can't we, that in this life when we decide to learn something, we know what that means is you go to a course or a school and you learn, you decide to become a violinist. You begin knowing no musical thoughts at all. You haven't got one clue about music. Would that be right, wouldn't it? You can't have you've got no thoughts in your mind about music. You don't know anything. So what do? You start listening to theory, don't you? Would you agree with that? You would, wouldn't you? You start to learn classical music. Lots and lots and lots of theory. And then slowly you pick up the violin and you can put into practice those theories, can't you? So would you agree that, after your first day of practice, you wake up next day and you didn't forget everything, did you? It's there. So you programmed your mind with all that, didn't you? And we get that when it's day to day, but it's just a bit of a shock to us to think you do it from leaping from one body to the next. Because we have a different view in the West. So the Buddha's view would be every millisecond, whatever anyone does, thinks, sees, hears, touches even, none of it goes astray. Everything goes into the mind, and we're not talking the brain here, so it's a bit abstract for us, and is programmed, it's kind of kept there. It's like we're taking photos every second and we store them away. So next day you can access that and you can grow your knowledge every day. Well, the Buddha would say that's exactly what happens at the time you die. It's a highly complex process, obviously. But even before you stop breathing, in a life not more than a few weeks before your consciousness zapped into your present mummy's human womb in this life, you died a certain way. We can deduce from the fact that you're a human, from the Buddhist perspective, that very strong virtuous imprints, like, we're lugging all these kind of bank vaults of imprints, seeds, tendencies, good ones, bad ones, because nothing you ever think or do or say goes astray. It's all there, programmed. So depending on the way you died and your tendencies and how you lived your life, it's all highly complex. One of those a very strong virtuous seed of morality, of non-harming, non-killing, probably practiced in the context of a spiritual path, is what was triggered even before you stopped breathing, which already programmed you to go to your present mummy's human womb a few weeks later. And at the same time, what was triggered was the millions of other seeds, they call them seeds, which would be your tendencies, all your experiences, meaning the people you meet and how they treat you in this life, and all of these tendencies, you're programmed, you're on autopilot. And you go through this gradual process, and what happens? You die, and then eventually when you mummy and daddy are in the bed, you zap there, run there, and all this new package is started. In other words, also the other view the Buddhists would say is you are literally the creation of your own past handiwork. You're not the creation of your mother's handiwork or father. They give you a body. Every millisecond of everything that you are, your tendencies are from your own hard work in the past. Like that music you can play today, it's not because of someone else. You practiced it. You bring from yesterday whatever the extent of what you practiced. That's what the meaning of karma is. Cause and effect. Everything we think and do and say goes into the mind, programs the mind, and will then eventually ripen in the future as our experiences at the hands of others. And even that's not random. We get the parents we deserve, and the siblings, and the next door neighbour, and the local rapist, and the kind people, and the rich one, and the poor one. How we're seen by others. All this is the fruit of our past actions as well. But Dalai Lama often calls it self-creation. It's a very different view. This is just in this consciousness, which is not physical. They talk about like a mental continuum. So all in the literature, it's dealt with an enormous depth, highly complex. And this is not it's not coming from anybody. Buddha has observed this. This is how they talk, And this is the Buddhist view. So the implication of this from the Buddhist one is that I'm the boss. I made myself. I bring my own stuff with me. Even my experiences, meeting you, meeting that person, having that person not believe my words, having that person give me $1 million. No accident. It's not random. We create intense history with each other, life after life. So we're going to bump into each other again and again. So we're the boss of the situation. And all this comes in your consciousness, which is not physical. And again, the literature is vast on what the mind is, how it functions, the death process, all this business, But essentially every sentient being, all the animals, all the creatures, and there are many others we can't see, the same. Buddha says this is a natural law that runs the universe. Does that answer your question a bit?
This makes complete sense to me, actually.
Well, that's interesting.
It's, it sort of speaks of a responsibility.
Well, that's the implication. If nothing else, one of the main implications of this view, which is reasonable, if you're, and I was a Catholic, okay? So as a Catholic, naturally God is the boss. I'm not criticising, by the way. I think it's a great view. Nothing wrong with it. Just not my view now, not Buddha's. There's a person, a being who's is the cause of the universe. He's the boss. No one created him. He's the universal energy, and he creates me. He creates the rules. And if I do wrong, I have to ask him to forgive me. And that by definition, also, that's okay. The view we have of morality is very interesting, I think. I asked a Jesuit priest friend of mine, what by definition is a sin? And he said, by definition, it's doing what God said not to do. But you look if you're a materialist in your mother's house and she says don't do that, Now, being a smarty pants, I'll say, why not? Well, we know her answer, because I say so. So if you look at our view instinctively about morality, we have all this guilt and neurosis, because we think of morality as a bunch of rules somebody else has imposed upon us. Mummy, daddy, the government, the police, some vague they out there, or God. And that's our very default mode of what good and bad is. So we're running around like children, avoiding, trying to get away with being naughty because no one saw me do it, and then wanting to be praised for being a good girl. This is our view of morality, very dualistic, The Buddha says it's ridiculous, it's childish. Virtue and non-virtue are natural laws. So, negativity will bring its own suffering to me. So my tendency to kill, not only will it harm the other, but guess what? I'm harming myself. And one of the consequences of this is I'll continue to do that action, and indeed I'll have consequences like that. Buddha says this is the law that runs the universe. He says it's a natural law. No one made it up. That's why you don't just believe in it in Buddhism. I like to say I'm taking this as my working hypothesis. I never use the word I believe. It's sort of intellectually lazy, And because we're so used to thinking of religion as a belief. But Buddha's a regular guy who came to these conclusions. He might be wrong. As the Dalai Lama says, if you can prove from, you're studying Buddhist methodology, you're doing it one step at a time, and you're ticking the boxes as you go, which, let's face it, is what music is, what experience is. If you take home that experience of what your violin teacher told you, and you do the homework, you do two things. You experience it as your own, and you verify it. And if you get home one day and the method she gave you doesn't work, you go back and you tell her right there, and if she's a good violinist, she'll accept a mistake. So if you do practice Buddhism, and it doesn't come, as he says, properly, seriously, you try it, then he's wrong. You must reject him. That's the approach, actually. So it brings accountability. That's for sure the biggest one I can see. I can see for myself personally, the biggest one, because you're not blaming anybody. You're not blaming mummy or daddy or God. Okay, no one likes to blame God, unless you're an Italian, I've heard. They're very naughty at blaming God. But we love to blame. And let's look at the materialist view. The materialist view, mummy and daddy are my creators, basically. So of course they're the blame. Of course you have to go to your parents. Who else made you? I didn't ask to get born, we'll say. It's not my fault. The Buddha says, sorry guys, you did. You know what I mean? So it's not blame because there's no one to blame you. It's accountability. That's what it does bring if you're doing it properly. That's for sure. Yes. Yes.
You made a statement that you said that if you don't do these things, then you keep them inside yourself, and 60 years later you'll become crazy.
If you suppress, yes, Mary, that's right.
Well, so if 60 years, I've already I'm in that 60 years later.
Right.
And it's not happening for me, so I'm wondering what,
What's not happening? Sorry, what's not happening?
Well, it's like, I've been working I've been working at this for a long time, and yet I feel like this karma that came into, my karma in my life is so strong. It's so hard for me. I'm not seeming to get...
Mary, no, I think, darling, you want to make me cry. You're doing what I just said about him. You're just always seeing the bad. You're not seeing your progress. You're not seeing how much you've done. No, and that's our addiction. We love negativity. You're always seeing what you haven't achieved. It's like you're at grade 74. You're always complaining because you're not at grade 75. I'm really serious here.
I know.
Do you kill, lie, steal, rape, badmouth? No, the answer's no. If you compared with most people, are you working on your mind? Yes. So what you're seeing is more dirt coming out. That's not bad, that's good. People understand this when it comes to going to the gym. You don't go kill yourself because you get another painful muscle. You're glad you discovered which muscle isn't working. I just think it's the wrong view. I really believe, because I know you a little bit, know you for years, and I know you're a sincere practitioner. It is wrong what you're saying. It is wrong. Be more humble with yourself. Be happy with your progress.
So is it what you think in your mind, like daily, and how you try to live, and how much does you're doing your practice, like having a daily Buddhist practice, how much does that override, or are they?
It's not a question of that. It's nothing like that. Okay, listen. What we're experiencing in this life is from seeds we planted before. What's in your garden today, obviously, is what you bloody planted in the past, right?
Right.
So you might have a big messy garden because you planted too many weeds, you didn't pull them out, and you didn't plant enough veggies. Well, you accept this. That's the garden I've come with. My life is my garden. Then you do your best to do the weeding. You pull, yes, it might be not as cute as his garden, That's okay, you rejoice in his. But meanwhile, here you are, you've got some methods, you've got some gardening tools. So you start pulling out the weeds, and then you can grow new flowers. But honey, they take time to fruit. You're wanting the fruits immediately. They were so greedy. They might take 50 years to come, next life. So be happy that you're sowing seeds. This is the Buddhist approach. If you use the analogy of gardening, it's a great one. A gardener won't walk out in their garden because they planted an acorn yesterday and have a mental breakdown because the oak tree's not there. They know it takes a while. Are we communicating?
Yes.
Kindly rejoice in your good qualities, please. If you're not doing your practices, then okay, don't rejoice.
Yeah.
But if you are, and more rubbish, okay, a friend of mine, I'm talking about this one dirt coming out, you know. This friend of mine, she's been a nun longer than me, and she's a scholar, and she's a quiet person. She's not an angry person like me, you know, volatile. I mean, I'm working with it. It's okay. But so it's more difficult because she doesn't see her own mind. It's only now, after she's like 60-something, unbelievable levels of depression and rage that she hasn't noticed before. But it's a good sign. We've got to realise this. Otherwise, it's attachment wanting it to be a fantasy. That's what attachment is. It's a junkie for the nice things. That's why we get upset. It's completely wrong. You're not understanding the proper process. That's why gardening is a great analogy. Things take time. Please. If you're not sowing the right seeds, then you have a reason to complain. But if you are doing your weeding and are putting in new seeds every day, then that's what you should rejoice about, not the recognition of not seeing the results. They're not ready to come yet. Does that make sense? If you are doing your practice every day and you keep commitments and keeping your vows, honey, you can relax. You are doing perfectly. You are doing exactly perfectly. Just be patient and relax. And enjoy your ugly roommates, okay? And the more ugliness that pops up, another whole level. I'm so happy. Welcome, guys. More challenges. Pull your sleeves up. Keep working. Yes? Okay. Yeah.
Are the number of gardens constant? Are the number of gardens constant?
Yeah. You can never. The Buddhist view would be, because there are countless trillions of mind streams, one of the words they use, like rivers of mental moments, sentient beings, mind possessors is the Tibetan word, mind possessor, trillions. There's not an atom of space you won't find minds in one form or another, and they're all beginningless and all endless. So you can't have new ones, and some can't drop off.
Do they drop off when they reach nirvana?
They just disappear into another subtle state of bliss. But if they're on the bodies, they're still existing. They can't disappear. Different teachings in Buddhism would say that they do disappear, but the view that we're discussing here says no. You can't get less or more. All right? Okay. Yes.
How do you talk about non-self, that other part of Buddhism? Because I hear you talk a lot about self-improvement and mind.
Yes.
And practice of,
Yes. Exactly. Okay. So yes, absolutely. So all of the teachings, you could say, lead to the teachings of non-self. Buddha's most marvellous teachings, where he diverged from the Hindu view, you know. And this is a tricky one. This is quite a subtle point. So all the stuff we're talking about here is talking about conventional reality. So there's conventional reality, and then what Buddha, as we know, calls ultimate reality. And they don't contradict. So as it says in the Heart Sutra, form is emptiness, emptiness is form. Form is nothing other than emptiness. Emptiness is nothing other than form. So the way to say it is that non-self or emptiness is a characteristic of conventional phenomena. So you've got to talk about a person existing before you begin to look into the non-self existence of that person. You've got to talk about a chair first, a conventional thing we agree is a chair, and then find its true nature. So non-self, if we think it doesn't imply conventional, is just a nihilistic view of nothingness, and that's pure nonsense. So we got to Buddha saying everything that does exist, first you establish conventionally what exists, a chair, a cup, a toilet, a person. Then we have to investigate how they exist. And this is Buddha's view, that you won't find within that any intrinsic character, which is the non-self business. So conventional reality doesn't deny ultimate. Ultimate and conventional kind of go together, is the way to see it, without getting, otherwise we get nihilistic. Does that make sense to you?
No, it makes total sense. But one thing you were saying about your body and your speech are kind of the servants of your mind.
Yeah, right.
Come from your mind.
Yes.
Well, if you think about the thoughts in your mind as not being yours.
That's right.
The thoughts in the mind.
That's right.
And if you don't use your body and your speech as being a servant of your mind, if you don't trust what your mind is saying.
Uh-huh.
So I was just interested in your different way of putting things to just kind of help me understand.
No, I understand what you're saying. No, yes, because I think that's something I've found over the years. Part of our biggest problem in our culture, because we phrase and frame and conceptualize things so profoundly differently from the way the Buddhist tradition in Asia, the Tibetan teachings that I'm receiving coming from the 14th century, which came from the Indian, because they value the lineage so well, they repeat the same words, the same structures used, and I think it's so easy to mystify those things. So I think it's really helpful for our minds to see things, to frame them differently, as long as we don't make things up, but to frame it differently in words that we can relate to. It's very important, I think, so we can really bring it down to earth, not just talk about it in a nice, holy way, you know. Just whether you're saying, I'm feeling that's important. Yeah. Someone else? Yes.
Thank you for your thoughts.
Okay.
I work in social services.
Yes.
I work with a lot of people who come with the
Yes.
people brought up.
Yes.
And I know you can't go back to yourself at 25 and say, if only you knew this.
That's right.
And there's no shortcuts. I'm clear
That's
on.
right.
What things can I try to tell people that are entering this field, entering social justice work or social services to not get so swung back and forth?
I'm not quite sure what you're telling me. I'm so sorry. Ask in a slightly different way, would you?
So people come and they want to do the action.
You mean people come and want to help
Yes.
other people,
Yes.
suffering people, poor people,
Haven't
something?
Done the work. you've
Oh,
done.
okay. Yeah, that's
And
that's
so
pretty common though.
without proselytizing.
Yeah.
How do I encourage them to find
Look at their own mind. It's very hard, you know, because there you are in a group of people and you're sitting there, you know, and you're all supporting and going and demonstrating against some latest terrible example of racism by the police, let's say. And you're all angry. Well, you don't sit there and give lectures about looking at your own anger. You just can't. And if a person gets so much anger, let's say, and can't see that maybe their anger is distorting things, then it's too hard. And unless you can see that. I mean, if you'd said to me these things that I'm saying now when I was a radical lefty, I would have punched you in the nose. So you go back off and mind your own business. Pathetic. I would have felt sorry for you. So you've got to know the person, what they're capable of, you know. You got to be, I mean, yeah. You have to be skillful. In other words, the only way you can be skillful, which is wisdom, to know how to help somebody else, is by you knowing it yourself. So even right back to the same answer. Because you can't start giving lectures to people. It's about the worst thing possible. Do you understand? Yeah. What else, people? Yeah.
I have another, sorry.
Yeah.
How do you reconcile, like, accepting things happen for a reason? You know, there are gardens out there that have been sowed, God's time, to finding your role in doing something about it.
Defining what? How to do something about it? Well, that's easy. You look at the garden, you see there's a bunch of weeds there, you know they're there because you planted them, but you don't go, oh, well, I planted them, I've got to have weeds. You go, do I like weeds? No, well, I better pull the mothers out. Simple.
Well, I can see that when you're doing your work, but when you're practicing compassion and you're trying to make an impact on something, in the social justice way that we're discussing here, you're volunteering, you're trying to...
But it's the same thing. It's the same thing. You're helping, there I am, an alcoholic, or you're trying to help, you're the Alcoholics Anonymous person, let's say, you're trying to help the alcoholics. And there we are, as a result of our past actions, now alcoholic, our garden's a mess. So it's the same thing. You recognise it's a mess because I created it to be a mess, but you try to help me find the way to change. It's the same. No difference. Exactly the same. Because it is that, because that's what we did before. The garden we've got is the garden we grew, so we have to see if we can change the garden, that's all, and that's how you help people. But you can't force. But it's the same whether it's your own garden or my garden. You see my garden, you help me try to see I can change it. Give me optimism, give me confidence, give me tools. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes.
It's exactly the same as yourself. And if you haven't,
You can also say, well, get out of my garden, I don't want you here.
Yeah, but that's where you've got to have the wisdom to know whether I need your help. Compassion is the wish to help. But honey, that's not what makes you capable of helping. That's wisdom. That's like her. You know, this is where our trouble is. We learn something. We get all kind of... I know when I was a radical lefty and a feminist, I was just this... You rave on, shoving it down people's throats. It's like outrageous. So fundamentalist, you know, because you've discovered some new truth and the whole world has to know about your truth. I mean, it's the rudest thing to do. It's so aggressive and arrogant. And it's the same with all sorts of things. Especially veganism and vegetarianism, I tell you that too. Woo! I remember, I've got this, there's a Facebook page, and a friend of mine does my Facebook page. I mean, I started getting engaged and saying something, then 47 people jump on top of you. I thought, oh, forget this, you know. So anyway, she tracks my travels and everything. So one time I was in Liverpool, in England, and I went to this cheese shop, because I eat cheese. And this amazing cheese shop, and there was this amazing kick-ass cheddar. So I had a photo about me and this kick-ass cheddar. Then all these fundamentalist vegans, how dare a Buddhist nun, blah, blah, blah. Even some of my fanatic Buddhist friends who know me for 40 years giving me lectures. I thought, oh, this is ridiculous. These people, back off, you know. So I didn't want to try and be too political. So what I did was I thought about, okay, you know, I Googled, because you just Google anything, everything's there. I Googled how many creatures get smashed on the cars. Insects, you know. So this guy in Holland did some research just on the number plate, and he extrapolated from this in a certain period, certain amount, that in America, per something, trillions of creatures get slaughtered every day. And I was refraining from saying vegans and vegetarians drive cars. And then the other story I posted was this scientist in Australia so fed up with all the fundamentalist vegetarians, you know, going on about things, being so holy. And he said that he found all these wheat fields. There's these wheat fields all over the country where they grow wheat, which indeed does feed the bulls that meat eaters eat, but also feeds the vegetarians. And he said these wheat fields in the off-season get occupied by millions of these cute little field mice. He had pictures. They said they sing songs to each other. These cute little field mice. Of course, when you come to wheat planting, they're all slaughtered for the vegetarians. So excuse me, just because you don't eat meat doesn't mean sentient beings don't suffer. So please just shut your mouth, you know. And I think it's because we're attached to food, that's all. Because, you know, people always say if you're not vegetarian, you're the same as the fisherman, you're the same as the slaughterhouse guy. But then nobody goes to the people who make the fishing rods in the factory. You're the same as no one goes to the gun makers and says, you know, you should be tried for murder. No, it was only food because we're so attached to food, I think. There's a lot of fuss and energy around vegan and vegetarian. So it's got to be more realistic, you know. You know, I'm talking about being political, shoving it down someone's throat. It's the rudest thing to do. Anyway, just a story. Yes. Some other people have a question here?
I'd be interested to hear you talk about Buddhism and burnout.
Burnout. What we're talking here. Burnout comes from attachment. I know it sounds really peculiar to say that because we don't even know what attachment is, you know, the way Buddha talks. Because when you rot, you know, if we can just realise these negative states of mind are neurotic in their nature. We think they're normal in the West. We give equal status to them. You know, if you want to use a therapist and I come to you and I say, would you please give me methods to get rid of all fears, all ego, all jealousy, all attachment, all low self-esteem, all anger, and have infinite love and compassion for everybody all the time, you would think I'm seriously mentally ill, right? Because we don't talk this way. But this is Buddha's view. So you're not there yet. But when we understand that these neuroses, which he says you can get rid of, there's a whole new way of looking, and they're really subtle. They're really, and they completely are mixed with all our good qualities. We can hardly see the difference. When we start to see the difference and start to understand them, they are why we get exhausted. They are why we get stressed. They are why we get angry. They are why we get upset. They're the reason. You don't get angry and upset and stressed because you have love and compassion. So when you know the difference, so you keep growing the good parts, but you be reasonable. You go have a good sleep, you have a good cry, you go to bed, and you get up next day. You know. So when you're aware of your mind. You know, stress, overwork is because of attachment for comfort. One of the main things. You know, when you've got to stay up late because you've got a deadline, you're exhausted. Mostly you're completely stressed out about not getting enough sleep. It's the mind that gets stressed out because you're so panicking about not having enough sleep. It's not the sleep that's a problem. Because when you're in love with somebody, you stay up all night, you didn't care. So it's the stress about it, you know. And the other one, so it's really, when we realise that's why we get burned out. It's not because of your compassion that you get burned out. Compassion does not burn you out. It's attachment polluting the compassion. It's a really fine point, you know. So it doesn't mean you shouldn't beat yourself because you get burned out, but recognize it. And when you're recognizing your mind and seeing the stress rising and all the aversion, the fears and the drama before it collapses, before you collapse, that's the skill. Do you understand? Does that make sense what I'm saying?
I think so.
Good. Yeah. Yep.
Do you think it's harder for the younger, like my children and the generations that are coming up to deal with mindfulness because of all the distractions? It seems like
You know, I'm really,
I mean,
it has to be reasonably, it has to be so. In one sense, it has to be so, because everything is so relative. And as soon as you know, you look back into your own childhood, whether it's 500 years ago, always the same. It looks more stressed and more difficult when you get older. Every generation says the same. And in one sense, it has to be. Yes, it has to be more frantic. There are more suicides now. There is more depression now. There are more people killing each other now. There's just no question. So yes, you can say, in that sense, of course it's true. It has to be. It has to be, because it's much more stress.
So will the work for them be harder?
Well, that's just what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But it depends on the person, you know. Depends on what you bring to your life, isn't it? Depends on, because what you get used to. I'm seeing that with people in prison. If you think about, when we think about being on death row and you hear the description of it, it sounds like dreadful. But when you're there, believe me, they all tell me you get used to it pretty quickly. It becomes your home. We're very adjustable. So, you know, if you got a person from when I was a kid in the 1950s and you leapt me into in the 21s, I would have had a nervous breakdown. You go there gradually, you know. So if you're brought up with it, naturally you adjust to it. And it is relatively more stressed, more difficult. Of course it is. But the human mind is infinitely capable. I see that with people in prison living in these hell realms. They're like hell. Noise. I mean, the guys tell me in these you know, permanent lockdown situations, it's violent, screaming, violent human noise for like 20 hours a day. Like in a madhouse, 20 hours a day. You can't imagine. It's like being in a football field 20 hours a day, like being in a rock concert. And they live like that, and they work on their minds. So we're amazingly capable. But it is hard. It has to be in general. But it's sort of a relative point, you know, really, because you only know what you know, isn't it?
But will they have, like, I love the metaphor of the relatives living in your roommates, or, you know, I
in your
come
head,
from
you mean?
extended
Not talk about your
family,
head.
So I had a lot of family growing up.
Uh-huh.
And so I can imagine, you know, all my neuroses are this family that is with me all the time.
I'm confusing you now.
Well, no, because I think if you just recognize that they're there, but they don't
Who?
have to. Your neuroses, my anger.
Oh, okay, all your roommates in your head. Yeah, all your crazy delusions. Yeah, them. Yeah, so no, one of the biggest, this is the point, once we can have the courage to own the fact that they're there, they're a bunch of boring old habits, but the Buddha's amazing point is they don't define us. There's a term in Buddhism, we've got to look in a dictionary, you know, he says that he has found from his own direct experience this amazing Indian guy back then coming from these amazing Indians, sitting on his bum for years and years, going to the depths of his own mind, intense, incredible, sophisticated work. He found directly from his own experience that the neuroses are adventitious, which means they're not at the core of our being. This is kind of outrageous concept, you know. So then when you realise even intellectually that and have confidence, you have less fear of what's in there. Because we can't stand seeing all our own mind. Look at the pain of just being jealous is almost like hell, isn't it? It's just the physical experience of jealousy is like living in your own head's like hell. So we can learn to have the courage, and this takes time, to not deny them and not dump them onto somebody else, but own them as mine, and then learn to know that sort of the way I think is when the delusions are running the house, all the good parts of me, the wisdom and the kindness and the bravery and the courage, they're all under the bed in the cupboard and hiding. They're afraid to come out. They've got to come out. You've got to practice the positive. Practice being your own therapist every day, is talking to yourself. The virtuous parts of you talking to the crazy parts, calming them down. You understand? And really, it's a good analogy. And then slowly you don't mind these crazy roommates. Right. You don't freak out when you see them shouting and yelling again. You don't get scared of them, because attachment can't stand anything miserable. It's attachment's the problem. It's a junkie for things only to be nice. So when we can go against that and be brave and confront these parts of ourselves, but know they don't define me, then they will be more subdued. They'll be living there quietly like sleeping dogs, you know? And the virtues will be running the house. And eventually when you realise emptiness, we'll all go eventually when we see the true reality, you know? But we're subduing them, but confronting them, not being scared of them, not wishing they'd go away, which is what attachment thinks. That's the part that's the worst. Do you understand? It takes time. It really, and it's optimistic, but this takes time. You've got to make a conscious effort to hear the crazy thoughts and tell yourself to shut up sometimes and say something positive, like here, I've known this woman so long. There she is, falling into the same trap. You just got to say positive things. Actually say you're doing a good job. Actually say, I'm keeping my vows, I'm doing this, I'm keeping that, I'm doing good gardening, I really rejoice. All you have to do is say that. But what is it in us that wants to say the opposite? It's beyond fascinating, you've got to admit. It's like it's almost a virtue to put ourselves down, Isn't it?
I know some people are much more ready to be positive. Like my mother was always positive, and
yes.
But I'm not. I fight it all.
But you're working on it. Well, there you go. Even rejoice for that. Don't rejoice because you're positive. Rejoice because you're working to be positive. You're working away at those weeds, honey. Be so happy, please, please. You have to. Time to go home, is it? What is the time? What's the time to go home?
Oh, maybe one more question.
Whatever you like. I mean, I'm just checking the time. Any more questions? Yes.
I have what I think is a really simple one.
Good, darling.
It seems like a lot of our problems is that we don't believe in our own basic goodness or Buddha nature.
Yes.
Or
whatever you want to call, yes.
Right. So is that kind of the basic conceptual understanding is that if we're here in this lifetime, in this form, and we have the capability to work with our minds, that by virtue of existing in this form means that we're basically good because
yes, it means. I mean,
moved us to this place.
There's no question. I mean, if we had the view of karma and understood, if we really read all the literature over the centuries of the workings of karma, literally the technicalities of the results of karma, we would be completely in tears of compassion, of happiness every day with ourselves. I'm not kidding. The fact that we've got a human birth alone, you just look at 7 billion humans, right? We've probably got 7 billion, I don't know if you even get mosquitoes in Seattle, do you? It'd be 7 billion mosquitoes in one person's garden in one night. And they're all sentient beings. They're all mind possessors who are experiencing the fruits of their actions like we are. So just to get a human mind, which means access to some positive qualities, and the vast majority of humans don't even use them, which is a tragedy, but just even the wish to use them, we've got to just recognise, it's like doing a comparison. We're part of the 0.1%. And you should be rejoicing. I'm really sincere. I mean, the Buddhist view would be that. It's not just accidental we're this way. We're not some random event plonked on this earth by somebody else. We're the fruit of our own past hard work. So, I mean, even a more simple way of putting it, is just having this confidence that negativity is not at the core of my being, that my misery that is there is not defining me, and there's other stuff. And of course, for a Buddhist, you study the Buddhist literature in more depth and you see the logic of this, not just some interesting experience, interesting belief. The Buddha's view of the mind, how he talks logically, how negative states are adventitious, and logically how virtues are linked to reality. It goes to great depth, so the more like anything. But for me, the main thing is the confidence. That's what I felt with working with people in prison. I didn't care they became Buddhists. It's not my job. We use Buddhist tools, but it was to help give them courage, optimism, love, confidence, which is most of them never had. I mean, one guy went off to the dentist one day, he said. They had to take him in town. And the nurse said, "Hello, how are you today?" And he burst into tears. He heard kind words. That was one of the tools I felt was just so easy, almost embarrassing, by giving these people someone who had nobody in their lives. Nobody ever said a good word they never had good words in their lives. Just giving them good words and optimism, and then things to think about to give them the tools to help them develop their own qualities. That, for me, was the most precious gift that we give, The prisoners I know. There's some old guy I'm going to visit in Virginia. I've known him a few years. He's like 75, getting on for 80 or something. He's depressed. He's Italian. And I send him sometimes I send a bit of money. I'm not trying to show off and just tell him. And I said I'd visit him because he's going to die soon, I think. So I said I'd visit him. I've known him for 20 years. He's not had one visitor in 25 years and was the first person to ever give him anything in 25 years. I mean, it's more sad than even homeless people. You're treated like an animal. You live in these garbage dumps. For something you did, whatever the crime was, I don't ask him. Just to have one human being be kind. It's like, this is something that they've never forget. And I almost feel embarrassed. I just wrote a letter and said some kind words. It's phenomenal. That gives courage to people. Optimism. We have to do that ourselves too. then we can bear the misery, because life is a miserable thing. But once we get more stable in our mind, even when it is so much suffering, it doesn't drag you down. Because one of the most interesting points that Buddha's making, we can prove it ourselves, that the more we cultivate the positive qualities, train ourselves in them, not just nice feelings that pop up every now and again, the less neurotic we are, the more we train to lessen delusions, the more we train to develop virtue. One of the natural consequences is your mind is more peaceful. Naturally. Even more blissful. Even the world is suffering, your mind is still content and blissful, but then there's more space for more compassion. So it's a natural thing psychologically for the Buddha. The negative states of mind in their nature are like a nightmare, just the experience of a nightmare. And as they're lessening and the virtues are growing, they are in their nature virtuous and peaceful and blissful. Blissful, hear the word please. Happy, content. You understand? Positive, as you said. We all know people that way. You know, their minds are more happy. Even just lessening anger, your mind is more happy, just naturally. It's optimism. You've got to have optimism, you know. Otherwise, if we don't have optimism, then what? You know, you might as well die now. Because, yeah, you understand. I always have this ridiculous, my philosophy. You've got to stay perky. It's a funny English word, isn't it? Even if you're drowning, stay perky. Especially when you're drowning, because you never know. You might just see an opportunity to save yourself. If you start panicking, you've lost the plot, you know. So you might as well stay perky no matter how bad things are. Keep moving, never giving up. Work on yourself and help others. That's it. One step at a time, please. Okay?
Can we
do a little prayer? Sure. So here, we've been 2 hours, you know, almost 2 hours. So the Buddhist view would be as many moments as there have been. There's as many seeds we have planted in our minds. We don't remember 90% of what we talked about, including me. But they've all gone in, okay? That's the Buddhist view. So we delight with this. We think maybe nourish these seeds from this moment forward, developing our marvellous potential, never giving up on our own marvellous potential, so we can be of benefit to others, no matter how long it takes. One step at a time. Let's sing 2 little prayers. Let's sort of express them. Kewaji nyu dudag lama sangye drub gyune drowa chi kyang malupa de sala Pasho Jang Chob Sem Chog Rinpoche Ma Kie Panam Ke Gyo Chig Kie Panyam Pa Me Payang Gong Ne Gong Du Pa Ba Sho